Hello there, it's Ina here and welcome to my art room. I'm glad you're back for part 2 of this journal. Here is one more look at the cover, which we decorated in part 1. And here in the inside, as you can see, I added some fabric in exactly the same way I added the outside fabric. And this gives me a nice base to work on. Now, it took me a little while to figure out what to do on the inside, and I went through a couple of different ideas and finally settled on making a portfolio. Now, I never made one of these before from scratch, so I made some templates just to kind of figure out how to put it together, and it was easy enough. Basically, I need 2 of these small pieces and 2 of the larger one. So I used my templates to cut out from these file folders 4 pieces. Now the file folders already have some score lines, which is helpful, but they're rather skinny. So I added a few more lines because I wanted the flexible part to be a little wider. I don't have a scoring board, but a ruler and a bone folder will do the trick and works just as well. Now, the dimension of these pieces, of course, depend completely on your book. I basically made the rectangle of the big pieces a little smaller than the book it will be glued to. And then I added an inch before I added a half circle for the flap. The smaller pieces don't have the big rectangle. They don't need it, just a little piece to attach them to the base. Again, an inch about to create the score lines and a half circle. So because I eyeball a lot of things, you can see these pieces are a little bit big and stick over the base rectangle, but no problem. By the time I add the second piece, it kind of all self-adjusts. And if you have to cut away a little piece here and there, so this all folds over and closes smoothly, it's very easily done. So I assemble the 4 pieces together, first the 2 small ones, and then the second big one goes on top of the first one. And as I fold it, you see the shape of the portfolio come together. Now for some more decorating, again with some simple cotton fabric. I want to sew this to this piece, but straight pins are not really suitable to pin things to cardboard, so I use a tiny bit of gel medium just here and there, so this fabric will stay put while I put it under my sewing machine. And again, just like I told you in part 1, you can absolutely glue this together as well. So my sewing is done. I used the zigzag stitch all around the edges. This piece was a bit stubborn, but it came out all right. The sewing caused a little tension, but luckily, as soon as I cut away the extra fabric, it pretty much laid flat. Now, I learned a few things about sewing on cardboard, and it may have been easier to use smaller individual pieces of fabric to cover the flaps. But actually, it all worked out pretty well in the end. Here I am taking off the loose fabric so that this part can glue tightly to my book. I'm tucking down the loose edges, and this part is going to be underneath the portfolio, so not visible at all. So next, the inside. Now here I opted to just use some paper rather than more fabric. And I have this nice distressed old-looking flower craft paper I had for a long time, leftover pieces, but it was just enough to cover these flaps. And again, I'm just covering them very roughly, and when it's dry, I cut off the edges. And for the middle here, I have another piece of craft paper, and that one I cut nice and straight on my paper cutter, and it fits perfectly right in the middle. There we go. I use a craft squeegee to go over it to make sure I don't have any bubbles, and my portfolio is coming together. I added 2 eyelets here so I can create an inside closure as well. And then I again added 2 different ribbons on top of each other just to get a little color going. But because the darker ribbon was a little dimensional, I cut it away just at the part which will go underneath the portfolio to avoid any bumps. A little bit of tacky glue, and my portfolio is attached to my book relatively straight. And I will weigh down especially the edges and make sure it all dries well. While that was drying, I worked on a very simple little pocket. I sewed 2 pieces of fabric back to back, just folded it over and made a little round top and sewed the edges. The frayed fabric is on the outside and the button is added and a little loop. The loop was made out of the same material which is on the string to close the portfolio, and the button is the same type of button I put on the spine. Again, instead of sewing this pocket, you can very easily just glue it. And if you don't want to sew on a button, you could use Velcro or a string closure. All right, everything is dry and ready. I am adding a tiny little paper folder someone made for me to the little pocket, but of course it could hold all kinds of things. Now the inside of this journal is rather plain, and I decided to go with this look, but you could definitely add more lace and embellishments. Here is my stack of greeting cards. These are paintings by famous artists, and I have quite a collection of them. I find them really inspiring to look at, and I'm glad they found a good home. Now you can see that I added a simple white string to the inside closure, but you definitely don't have to open and close this every time, but you could just slide things underneath it. So this brings me to the end of this journal. I hope you enjoyed this project and I give you some ideas and you run with it and make it your own. You can definitely use colorful fabric. You could do it just with paper. You could add whatever suits your taste. So thank you so much for coming. I hope to see you really soon again. Bye bye for now.